Veblen faded out of the picture in New York after he left the New School of Social Research, and declining health limited his activities. At least his insight into many things was quite interesting. Whether he would have gone on and been able to envisage an operating social mechanism of a technological socialization for the distribution of abundance, in all kindness, we cannot say. Bellamy was an artist and did a lovely job in this looking backwards and his other book, Equality. But we would like to point out that Jules Verne in his book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, envisaged a marvelous submarine. The book was so intriguing that it enjoyed a worldwide sale. Nevertheless, no naval architect or designing engineer would attempt to design a submarine from Jules Verne's artistic concepts displayed in his 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It just wouldn't work. The same can be said of Edward Bellamy. Edward Bellamy's was an idealistic projection. He had the intuitive feeling of the artist, but it also was entangled in human beings on the theory they could be elevated to such a high degree of perfection in their moral and ethical values that a new society could be made to function on the essence of their betterment. Frederick W. Taylor developed his theories of scientific management while working at the Midvale Steel. Out of his Midvale Steel experiments with time studies and that big husky Dutchman that he had as lead man in his pig iron gang at Bethlehem Steel, Frederick Taylor came up with a set of guide rules on how management could obtain greater productivity from labor by making human labor more efficient. Taylor's series of scientific time studies and measurements of work-human effort scored quite a hit in the era preceding World War I and just after World War I. A number of engineers became so-called disciples of Frederick W. Taylor, even though he had passed on to his reward in 1915. A considerable number of engineers took up the so-called scientific management of Frederick Taylor and further embroidered it and publicized themselves as efficiency engineers and management consultants. Henry L. Gantt had been Taylor's assistant at the Midvale Steel and the Bethlehem Steel Company. Gantt, Morris L. Cook, Leffingwell, Emerson, H. K. Hathaway, Frank B. Gilbreth, Harlow S. Person and C. J. Barth were among the many prominent advocates of Taylor's efficiency system with some variations. Gantt, Barth and others tried to start an organization, the New Machine. The New Machine never got off the ground. All of them wrote articles and delivered papers in the engineering societies and management conferences. But their chief purpose was in creating a national image so they could sell their services to large-scale private enterprises, scientific managers and efficiency engineers who would be able to install the system that could extract more productivity from the American worker. We never had any use for Taylor or any of the efficiency or scientific management crowd. They never realized that human toil was the last thing in the world you had to be efficient about. The only way to be really efficient is to eliminate it entirely, and this would have been heresy to any of the Taylor, Gantt, Barth, Cook efficiency crowd. It is sad to contemplate that men of the technical ability of the names mentioned in this paragraph were so lame in their thinking and social outlook that they missed the boat so completely. Who in hell wants to be efficient with a shovel, and what sense would there be even if you succeeded? They should have had their heads open with a shovel. It might have been more effective. The formulation of our concepts began prior to World War I and during World War I and developed from then on. Some interesting examples: we had already developed our continental accounting system with our geographical division numbers, namely, a combination of the latitude and longitude of the southeast corner of a quadrangle, giving you an accurate location of any place on the continent or the world without respect to political boundaries, place names or languages. This in conjunction with the conductivity characteristics of carbon coding with a modified Dewey Decimal System enables one to devise a continental accounting system and medium of distribution, becoming at once a continental accounting system and continuous inventory of both production and distribution on an hourly basis, continent-wide. You have to bear in mind, of course, that the system was devised before computers were developed to handle the instantaneous computation necessary under this system. We preceded the computers by some years. We brought out our 1.5 volt DC power transmission in 1923. We brought out our calendar prior to that, in 1921 and 1922. We are stating this merely to give you some idea of the periodicity of the development of events of the organization and its concepts. Question number 5 asks, Members locally point out that there were attempts to take over your ideas and the organization of technocracy, and as a consequence of this it was incorporated. The incorporating papers of Technocracy Incorporated were originally drawn up in the fall of 1932. This was done primarily to restrain the terrific flood of unauthorized material, from every writer from the far right to the far left attempting to climb aboard the bandwagon. The granting of the Charter of Incorporation of Technocracy Incorporated was delayed for some months due, apparently, to political pressures brought to bear in Albany, the capital of the state of New York. We regret that the charter was not issued in 1932 as we originally intended. It would have saved a considerable number of headaches. The incorporating organization charter was secured by the law firm of Cadwallader, Wickersham and Taft of New York City. The incorporation of technocracy had nothing to do with any attempt on the part of any group to take over technocracy or, to use your own words, compete with technocracy. A meeting was held in the Hotel Morrison in Chicago, Illinois, in the last part of June, 1933. This was prior to our break, so-called, with Columbia University. There were, at the time of the Chicago meeting, over 20 different organizations of technocracy on the map, from a duly incorporated political party in the state of Illinois, to an Institute of Technocracy in California, and various other organizations. Also included in so-called technocracy were organizations from New York, Minneapolis, and the All-American Technological Congress of Chicago, to name but a few. There were several magazines and newspapers being published without any authorization or connection with us whatsoever. Gernsback in New York. One in color, printed in Minneapolis. The Technocracy of Obispo Beach in California, and many others. The competition which you speak of began with a burst of publicity in 1932, but the competition did not become politically organized until some time later. That is a whole story in itself. The amount of material that one has to wade through to document it is beyond the time at my disposal in writing to you at this moment. In question number 3 you ask, how does the prediction of the collapse of capitalism compare with that of Marx? Technocracy never had any philosophical predictions on the inevitable collapse of capitalism. The Marxian political philosophy was a condemnation of the ills of so-called capitalist society and a propaganda political document that all wealth was created by work, labor and toil, a theme which he sums up in his Workers of the World Unite. Marx, of course, envisaged abolition of one estate and the creation of another, and that the capitalist class should be expropriated and the workers be installed as the new social elite in a socialist world. Technocracy Incorporated has never held any brief for the so-called capitalist class, or for that matter for any proprietary interest or group in our social structure. Marx only wanted to eliminate the so-called exploiting and owning classes. We contend that it is hardly worth undertaking. What technocracy has always contended is that if sufficient energy-consuming devices are installed and the total amount of extraneous energy consumed per capita reaches or exceeds 200,000 kcal per capita per day, toil and workers alike will be eliminated, and, when toil is eliminated, the bourgeoisie will likewise go down the drain of history. Technocracy has always contended that Marxian political philosophy and Marxian economics were never sufficiently radical or revolutionary to handle the problems brought on by the impact of technology in the large-size national society of today. It is sufficiently revolutionary to be of some importance and temporary application to underdeveloped areas of the globe. We have always contended that Marxian communism, so far as this continent is concerned, is so far to the right that it is bourgeois. It is well here to bear in mind. The technological progression of the next 30 minutes invalidates all the social wisdom of previous history. Technology has no ancestors in the social history of man. It creates its own. We could give you the energy calculations in many examples, but that takes paper and time. A simple one in agriculture in order to handle the food production where the costs are lowered and to where the speed is so great that it becomes applicable to large-scale production. Concepts and design factors go beyond anything that the Russians or Chinese have ever attempted, because they base their concepts on the collaboration of human beings and the values of human toil and hand tools, although they were trying to adapt these concepts to the introduction of mechanical means. Neither Russia nor China has as yet developed the design to handle even the production of wheat in their area, let alone other commodities. The knowledge is here. And it has been done, their design factors have been proven. It requires more energy per minute than has ever been employed in the cultivation of the soil anywhere in the world in history, and even without further development, one unit now in existence plants and fertilizes 70 acres of wheat per hour. You cannot do it with human beings on the land. You have to move the human being off the land to make way for powerful equipment which is not yet in quantity production any place on the globe.